comments that you've made and some of the things that I've read in your books, including your marvellous book, Positioning for Professionals, seems to me a little bit counterintuitive. And there are comments like, you have to shrink to grow. Is that really the case? And if so, how can it be true in terms of positioning for a knowledge practice that actually wants to grow?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think there's a lot about business strategy that's counterintuitive. It's not, there's an axiom that good marketing is common sense, and I couldn't disagree more. It's not common sense at all. The things that what common sense would tell you to do is aim for the widest market possible, try to appeal to as many different sectors as you can, offer as many services as you can. I mean, that would be common sense, because it would say, well, that's going to open more doors, it's going to present more opportunity. But in practice, the reverse is true, because no firm is good at everything and can't be good at everything. And what buyers of professional services are buying is ultimately expertise.
Yeah.
So by definition, you can be expert in something, but not everything. So you have to decide what it is that you're going to claim as an area of specialty that you know well, that buyers of professional services where they would find you credible. So that means it's more of a process of subtraction than addition when you're talking about business strategy. I love the idea that strategy is deciding what not to do. Kind of my all-time favorite definition. Because it's easy to decide what to do, what to add. I think most firms are famous for going on their annual off-site strategic planning retreat and coming back with a wall full of flip charts that list all the things that, we should do this and we could do this, and all the things they're going to add and all the things they're going to explore in the coming year. And my advice to most firms is that they should do the opposite. They should get together and decide what they're going to stop doing so that they can get better and better at doing fewer things. It's not that we don't want to progress and evolve and stay on the leading edge and continue to improve our skills and knowledge. Of course we want to do that. But we don't want to fall victim to the idea that clients buy a wide range of service.
So it's a fallacy for a professional knowledge practice to hold itself out as a full-service law firm and expect that it can impress all potential clients.
Yeah, I mean, full service is a useless term if there ever was one. I mean, you'll find it on the website of most firms, law firms, ad agencies, accounting firms. They can't help themselves but to say we are a full-service firm serving a wide variety of clients. But really, no client is buying full service. They're buying a particular area where they need help, a particular problem they need to solve. And by saying we have a wide range of experience, it's actually a turnoff to the sophisticated buyer or client, because they understand that what they want is a best-in-class provider, and they understand that to be best-in-class, you can't do everything. You've got to be focused in certain areas where you can claim to be not just the best in Melbourne or the best in Australia, but possibly the best of the world, or among those that are the best in the world. And you can choose to be. I mean, there's a inversely related phenomenon here where there is a market for full-service firms, but the market is small companies, small clients, and they're less sophisticated with smaller budgets that don't have the money or the sophistication to work or even look for a best-in-class specialist. They're fine looking for what I call a local market generalist versus a national or international specialist. So that's the country doctor, that's the country lawyer, who does a little bit of everything and has to by definition, because they're the only service in town. But that's not how the big firms or the big companies are looking for professional service providers.
So you're saying that if we profess to have expertise, we should be looking to roll that out in a relatively narrow scope to a defined group of potential clients. So this applies not only for services but our client base as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the great Peter Drucker said the first question of any business is, who is your customer? And the answer can't be everyone. You've got to have a well-defined customer base that then would lead you in the direction of what services to offer, what services does that particular kind of customer want and need. So you want to have, and the word narrow is kind of scary. It feels limiting. It feels small. Well, we don't want to be small. We want to be big. Well, this is back to the counterintuitive part again. Narrow is not the same as small.
Yeah.
Starbucks is narrow.
Mm.
Coffee.
Mm.
They are a huge global enterprise.
Not so much in Australia.
Yeah, I know Aussies are famously anti-Starbucks, which is okay with me. But that, most of the truth is, most of the very large companies are actually a lot more narrow than you think they are. The Wall Street, the finance community has a term for this. They attach what they call a diversification discount to diversified companies. So a conglomerate that has lots of portfolios and lots of holdings in lots of different businesses, actually their stock is discounted between 10 and 15% by finance types, because they know that those companies by nature are less profitable. They will, the classic example is Coca-Cola and Pepsi, famous rivals. Pepsi is still quite diversified. They have beverages, they have snack foods, they have other consumer products. Coke years ago decided they were going to focus. They divested all those kinds of holdings that they used to have and just decided they were going to be in the beverage business, things you can drink. And they are probably they're much larger than Pepsi, and don't quote me on this, but maybe twice as profitable.
But isn't there a danger that if we narrow our service offering, we're going to be much more vulnerable to our competitors? They'll pick us off easily, even though we might be experts. The
opposite is actually true, because the more you're focused in a specific area, the deeper you build your knowledge and expertise, the more formidable you are. The harder you are. Your goal is to offer something that's scarce.
Yeah.
And what's scarce is valuable. It's the law of supply and demand in economics. So what's scarce is valuable. If what you do is hard to find, not easily obtained, then it's harder for you to be knocked off by competitors. Much easier to be dismissed as yet another full-service law firm that does everything.
So I'm not an economist, but I understand the law of supply and demand. And what you're saying is that if something is scarce, but there is potentially a market for it, if it's relevant to potential consumers, there might be some price implication in that as well.
Definitely, that's what gives you the ability to command a premium price, because you're solving problems that other firms can't do, so that you're a brand in demand, and therefore you have a price premium. The firms that have the deepest expertise, and by the way, this is true. This phenomenon of expertise is true in academics and in science and music, and I mean, just pick your field. Who's doing the interesting work? Is it the generalist or the specialist?
Yeah.
It's always the specialist. Generalists don't break new ground. It's those who are deep in their discipline that push the boundaries and are discovering new things. And this is also one of the fallacies that I think we have to overcome when it comes to focus. Isn't that boring? Isn't that going to be? I like variety. I don't want a steady diet of just one thing. I hear a lot of that, especially in my business with creative types. And this is counterintuitive again, but actually all the interesting work is being done by specialists who go beyond the conventions, who go beyond the tried and true, to truly break through innovative solutions that is much more interesting and much more professionally fulfilling than just scratching the surface. Instead of digging 100 shallow holes, you're digging one very deep one.
Yeah. I suppose there are implications for our own teams as well, because if we are actually trying to go deep, then it might mean that we have to bring other people onto the team who have knowledge that we personally don't have, and we can create an environment or community of service providers who can stimulate each other and push the boundaries even further.
Sure, and I think in most firms you need both generals and specialists. You need the specialists who are deep in their sector and serving on the front lines of serving clients and solving client problems, but you do need some generalists who are maybe in a client service position or a business development position that know a little about all that goes on in the firm. So you need both positions. More specialists than generalists, though.
Yeah. Tim, what you've shared about narrowing the focus sounds to me a little bit like decluttering, and there's this global phenomenon at the moment called Marie Kondo.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
You struck me as being a very organised, uncluttered person. You probably...
It's a nice way of saying perfectionist, probably, but yeah, that's okay.
Simplicity. So is that Marie Kondo decluttering principle, is that a good principle for people in business, do you think?
Wow, that's the most interesting question I've been asked in a long time, and I've not read her book. I mean, I know about the phenomenon.
Has she written a book? I thought she was just a...
Yeah, I think there's a book, and sure, but I think the principle applies in the sense that it's simplification, it's subtraction. When you're focused, I think it's, I prefer it's different for different people. I can't work in a chaotic environment or a messy desk, right? So I just need that so I can think clearly. But it applies, I think, in business in the sense that if you've got too many things surrounding you, competing for your attention, that you will be distracted and it will not focus on the things that can make the real difference. One of the I think best stories, my favorite stories about this was when Steve Jobs, you recall Steve Jobs was forced out of Apple.
Yeah.
And it was taken over by John Scully, who came from PepsiCo and who had a more of a conventional business mindset, and he started diversifying. And by the time Jobs came back to Apple, was brought back to rescue the company, Apple had 350 products, either on the shelves or under development. Jobs meets with his key executives. He gets up on a whiteboard and he draws two intersecting lines, and he said, "Guys, we're gonna take these 350 products and we're gonna narrow it down to 4. And in these 4 quadrants," he said, "here's what they are. It's going to be a personal computer for the home and a business commitment. It's 4 things." And wow, so all these other projects and people who were working on them, Apple was decluttered, right? And refocused, and that decision led to the creation of the most valuable company that's ever been on the face of the earth. So I think that's a pretty powerful demonstration. Decluttering your company, so you can focus on a few things and do them well.
And so, can I ask you a little bit about marketing? This is your endeavour of specialisation,
Sure.
as well as pricing. Should we be simply trying to increase our sales and our revenue, albeit we've heard you say with a narrowed focus, or are there other important things as distinct from just revenue? Profit.
Very insightful question. Yeah, it's. I like the banker's creed. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. And you could argue that and I do argue that the default purpose of marketing is not to increase sales; it's to improve profit. And the strongest, the activity that correlates strongest with profitability is the ability to command a price premium.
Yeah.
So what happens a lot in the marketing sector is you've got chief marketing officers who come on board a company and they last only 18 months and are fired or moved on because they haven't improved the company's sales. And there have been a couple interesting studies that have shown that even those people who might not have improved sales might have actually helped maintain that company's pricing integrity. That the marketing they did actually helped them maintain their share and maintain their pricing integrity, which is even more important than sales. So it's looking through the wrong end of the telescope to think that it's all about revenue. It's all about, can we maintain a price point against competitive offerings, and that this is true in professional services as well, I believe.
And is there some relationship between brand and price as well? I know that brand is something that you're passionate about, and I think I read in your book that we're not actually selling products, we're selling our brands.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different definitions of brand. I like the notion that a brand is a consumer's or a buyer's idea of your product or service or company. So a brand is an idea, and it is the manifestation, the outward manifestation of your company. None of us ever buy a product or service. We buy the benefit, the utility, the usefulness that product or service provides, and so that the utility that's associated with the brand, the reputation of the brand, is really what we're buying as much as anything. So I think, better than I do, that brand hasn't always been important in professional services. You'd have maybe some synonyms you'd use for it, reputation, but it's really the same thing. I mean, reputational capital is brand, and the studies that are done every year by the brand development firms show the incredible value of brand equity, the price premium that you can command due to brand equity. If you look at the market value of a public company, I'll pick on Coca-Cola again, only 30% of the market value of Coca-Cola company is its physical, tangible assets. It's trucks and buildings and cash in the bank and things you can touch. The other 70% is brand equity. That's true of all public companies, by the way. It's again, that's been widely researched and studied, gets reported on. It's usually at least 60-40, so that 60% of the total market capitalization of a company, of a big public company, is in the value of the brand. So that speaks to how important your brand is.
Shrink to grow. That remains a challenge for me, but it's a very, very important lesson for us to take on board.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's inevitable that you have to shrink to grow. I think the idea is that you should be willing to shrink to grow. That you believe in the principle of business strategy. You believe that strategy is deciding what not to do. So you accept that, and then you enter the world of trade-offs. I mean, that's another way to think about strategy. It's a series of trade-offs. You can be a suburban company or an urban company. You can't be both. You can serve local markets or you can serve international markets. It's difficult to do both. Those are kind of different business models. So it's always this series of trade-offs. So you have to be mentally and psychologically willing to make these trade-offs, knowing that one of the results might be that your company will actually get a little smaller before it gets bigger, because you're going to trim those barnacles off the ship. And I think firms are very much like ships that sail through the oceans for years and years, and they collect these barnacles that just they didn't intend to. They diversify by default, not by design, and it happens with every client that comes along and says, "Hey, by the way, I know you haven't done litigation in the past, but can you do litigation?" And you come back to the office and say, "Yeah, I think can we do litigation? I think we could do litigation." So then you add that new service, that new function, and so before long you look back and you've diversified way beyond what you intended. Most companies in business literature, you see that most companies start out quite focused, and then they unintentionally diversify based on what clients ask them to do. And one of the concepts I really like about committing to a positioning strategy is this idea of you've got to be willing to outgrow your customers. To let your customers outgrow you. You've got to be willing to let your customers outgrow you. Meaning, there will come a point in time where a customer will ask you, "Can you do X?"
Yeah.
And you have to say, "Actually, no, we don't do that."
Wow. Yeah.
And so they then say, "Okay, well then we'll have to move on and maybe hire a firm who does." And you have to be okay with that, because you're going to stay committed to what you do well, and you know that there will be other business to come along and fill that pipeline.
That's kind of a nice little segue into the next question I wanted to ask you about being a really good match for particular customers. I think in your book you say that if you're really focusing on customers who are right for you, it's axiomatic that there will be other customers who are not right for you. And that's okay. In fact, I get the sense that you're saying we should, in fact, be trying to polarize to attract some clients so well that we might actually repulse other potential clients, and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe not repulse, but we just wouldn't be attractive to them. And I think we want to be polarizing in a positive way. We want to be. I mean, just think of the most successful brands. They have lovers and haters.
Yeah.
They have strong proponents, people who love them, and people who just despise them. I mean, Starbucks is a pretty good example.
Yeah.
The New York Yankees, New York Times. I mean, it's just Microsoft, right? People who lovers and haters, and that kind of polarization is one of the hallmarks of a strong brand. Because if you're a mediocre brand, people don't care. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion. But if you put a stake in the ground for what you stand for, then you're going to have people on either side of the spectrum. I think it's a pretty good litmus test.
Yeah. So, Tim, we talked about narrowing our focus earlier on, refining our service offerings, and perhaps not trying to be all things to all people, but acting for clients who are actually a good fit for us. How might we go about working out which clients are the best clients for us?
Yeah, great question. A methodology that I think works well and is, I think, easy to remember is the essence of a positioning strategy can really be defined by 4 questions. Who, what, how, and why. So that the who is your customer in terms of what markets do you intend to serve. You can't know every sector, you can't know every industry. So you start there. The question of what is what services, what solutions do you solve for clients, what problems do you solve for clients, what are your solution sets. The how is the way in which you approach business, your philosophy, your methodologies, your ways of working, your company culture, and the why is your reason for being in business. It's your mission. It's the reason you get out of bed in the morning. It's your purpose. So, an ideal client, if you were to do a Venn diagram and you'd see the intersection of all 4 of those circles, that's an A prospect. They're a good match on all 4. They're in your sweet spot in terms of sectors. They want exactly the kind of expertise that you offer. They align with your value pricing methodology and your culture, and they resonate with your purpose. So A prospect, perfect fit. A B prospect would qualify in 3 of the 4 areas. Yeah. Maybe not all 4, but 3 of the 4. A C prospect, 2 of the 4. A D prospect, you really shouldn't be trying to pursue a D prospect. You want to pursue the A's and take the B's seriously, and not really ever have to deal with the C's and D's. That's how I try to prioritize prospecting.
So can I ask you about purpose then, our purpose? It's sometimes the case that, in fact, I think you've mentioned this already in a conversation. Startups usually know why they're in business, and then as they mature a bit and they diversify a bit, there's sometimes a bit of mission drift, and they lose sight of why it is that they're actually in business. They have to theoretically come back to that question from time to time, check in.
Yeah.
And is that something that's easy to do, or does it take a bit of grunt?
I think it's infernally difficult. I think of those 4 areas, that the why piece is by far the most difficult. And there's a pretty well-known book called Start With Why, and many others that I think are very good on this topic. I just think it's hard to start with why. I think you need to address why, but in my consulting work, often we save why for last, not first, because it's the hardest to address. And sometimes, if you don't inherently know what your why is, it's really hard to invent one. I mean, you either have one or you don't. And sometimes it's buried deep inside the corporate psyche, and you have to unearth it and manifest it. You know, it's there, but it's just like you just said, it's covered with the dust of all the passing years in which they forgot why they're doing what they're doing, and have come to accept the default purpose of making money, which is not a purpose at all, right? I like this idea that a litmus test for good purpose is that it's like the North Star. It's like a guiding star on the horizon. You're always pursuing it, but you never quite ever reach it, right? It's got to be that aspirational, that it's that motivating.